It's exciting to be here, Pastor Tiz. It's really an honor to spend this evening with you. I'm bringing greetings from the finest gentleman that I've ever had the privilege of working for, and I've had the privilege of working with many really great people. Ambassador Friedman is not just a righteous person. He's not just a bright person. He's not just a person of integrity, but he's a friend. And he's taken my family and myself on this journey. And for that, there's never enough that I can do that can thank him and appreciate him and everything that America owes to him, everything that Israel owes to him, everything, frankly, that people who believe in freedom and the Word owes to him, pales in comparison to what I know about him. Wow. And him and his wife, and whatever you think, multiply that by some exponential function, and at that point in time, you'll be able to see part of the greatness that he is as a leader. And the would go without saying, but needs to be said anyways, that you can lead all day long. If you're not leading the United States of America under the leadership of a president who recognizes what the United States of America is, it really doesn't matter. Yes. It really doesn't. The advantage to David Friedman is when he was David Friedman, not Ambassador David Friedman, he said the same things, he believed the same things, he knew the same things, he articulated the same things. But when you could work for President Trump, you're not just saying it, you're actually doing it. And it's really a high honor and a privilege. Now, I'm going to use the word we a bunch this evening when talking to you. Allow me just to explain to you what we means in this particular case. Any basketball fans here? You've heard of the game basketball? A couple, yes? Go Raptors? You can go outside, Josh. Okay. Or at least give me an American team. I'm saying it's fine. Okay. But anyways, there's a guy named Wilt Chamberlain who scored 100 points in a game. Most people are familiar with that. Probably the greatest individual feat in a team sport ever accomplished in athletics. And there's a guy on his team that same evening named James Richardson who scored 2 points in that game. And Richardson is interviewed after the game and he's asked, how are you going to remember this historic evening? And Richardson is upset with that comment. He goes, how am I going to remember this historic evening? Let me tell you how everybody's going to remember this historic evening. Everybody's going to remember this historic evening as the night that Wilt and I combined to score 102 points. So when I say we, just let's be very clear of who the we is. He probably cannot do what he does without his chief of staff, but that's like saying that Wilt couldn't score. The team wouldn't have made it to 102 points without Richardson. That's correct. They would have been at 100. I mean, they would have been okay. And so the ambassador is thrilled when groups like yours come, thrilled when leaders like you come, and to be here with Josh is always a pleasure. So I'm going to share with you what I share with the groups that I really like. And then we're going to hopefully, maybe even questions if you want, I'm going to avoid as many of them as I can, but we'll do it in a subtle way that you don't realize until after I've left the room, okay? That's what we're going to do. Fantastic. So I always share the following two things because they're really poignant and I think they matter a tremendous amount. I was very close with, and still am pretty close with, the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott. And in the course of, he definitely deserves a round of applause as a human being and as a leader. And in my civilian days when I made money, so he had me assigned to various different tasks as sort of like one of his Israel guys. Josh was also one of his Israel guys, might still be. And when the first F-35 was delivered here to Israel, he sent me to run a delegation of state reps and state senators to come and to welcome that F-35 that was going to be here. So it was a great privilege to be able to come here. And if you don't know anything about the F-35, this is probably the greatest machine of technology of war ever created. And the advantage to this machine, this plane, is that by having it, shouldn't cause damage. By having it, should prevent damage. Right. The deterrence of strong power should be unquestioned and should be known by all. And so we're sitting on the runway with a bunch of Texas state senators and state reps. And, well, it got postponed. There was an insurance question. I mean, this is what happens when you sell stuff to Israel. But anyway, so it gets postponed a little bit. And it flies in at night, and part of the crowd had dissipated, and they allowed us to listen in to the F-16 that's escorting in the F-35. It's a really cool ceremony if you've never seen a plane sold to another Air Force. And the F-16 is escorting in the F-35. It's a very historic moment, and the guy flying the F-16 starts to talk. And we're on the ground, and I'm translating from Hebrew for my buddies from Texas what the pilot is saying. Now, you haven't been in Israel all that long. You should understand that everybody here is running for some form of office. That is, the person at the checkout line If they don't think they're the prime minister, they think that the prime minister secretly works for them. So if you give somebody a microphone in this country, they're going to go for it. So here's a guy with a microphone in an audience and says, I want to share a story, which is a funny thing to do as the airplanes are landing. But he shares the following story. Says, do you know in 1944, after everybody knew what was happening with the Holocaust, there were 1 million Jews roughly left in Nazi-occupied Europe, all in Hungary, more or less all in Hungary at this point in time. And the organized Jewish community at that point in time marched on Washington to get a meeting with the president, begging for one bombing run to blow up the tracks from Auschwitz, the death camp, to Hungary, or vice versa, from Hungary to Auschwitz, knowing that it would not save all 1 million, but slowing down the process as the Allies were winning. We're about to celebrate D-Day, commemorate the heroism. Never have so many owed so much to so few. That one bombing run could have saved hundreds of thousands of Jews. And they did not get a meeting with the president. They tried for the vice president, did not get a meeting with the vice president, tried for the secretary of state and didn't get a meeting with the secretary of state, and finally met with sort of like as a courtesy call some undersecretary of probably a division that doesn't exist, might not even have existed back then, and they did not get a bombing run, and over 900,000 of those 1 million Jews left in Hungary were murdered. Says that was in 1944. 4 years later, May 14th, 4 p.m. Israel time, Ben-Gurion, against the advice of all of his advisors, declares Israel as a state. Why did his advisors recommend him not declare a state? Because there was no way, with pure logic and common sense, that Israel would be able to defend itself from the masses that were going to attack it immediately. And Ben-Gurion, a non-believer, declared the state. Why did he declare the state at 4 p.m.? It's a funny thing, May 14th at 4 p.m. Why did he do that? The goal was to declare a state the day that the British left, which happened at 12:01 a.m., May 15th. So why did he do it at 4 p.m. on a Friday? Because a non-believer understood that for this country to exist, it needed something else. The possible needed to overcome the impossible. And he would not declare the founding of a Jewish state on the Sabbath. Wow. So at 4 p.m., you have to understand who Ben-Gurion was to have done that. And at 4:11 p.m., plus or minus, Harry Truman recognized the state of Israel, linking us solidly forever with the land of Israel. And our blessings in America have been greatly linked to our support of the state of Israel. And just last year, 367 days ago, it's now more than that. I thought it was last week. 372 days ago, we were sitting at the embassy opening, which opened up in Jerusalem, May 14th at 4:11 p.m. 70 years to the minute that Harry Truman recognized the state of Israel. We rectified a grievous wrong of our foreign policy by not recognizing that Israel, like every other country on this planet, is entitled to choose their own capital. And we, under the leadership of President Trump and the administration of Ambassador Friedman, opened up an embassy to the moment that the United States recognized the state of Israel. The guy on the F-16 did not share all of that. That was just necessary background so you can understand what he was saying. 1948, May 14th at 4 p.m., Ben-Gurion, against the advice of all of his advisors, declares a state. Said about 40 years later, the Iron Curtain had fallen down, and Israel was invited to participate in joint NATO activities, which was very flattering for a fledgling state called Israel, with an air force that hadn't yet been known as the best air force in the world. And there's a whole tumult because where were they invited to engage in these joint practices? Over Poland. And there's a big debate in Israel whether or not they should have any joint activities over Poland. Does that make sense? And there was a debate back and forth in all of the op-eds, and they decided that they would go, but on condition that they would do a flyover over Auschwitz. And if you don't own this picture, buy this picture. And if you own the picture and it's not displayed prominently in your home and office, you should change that. Because some pictures are 1,000 words, and others are roughly 6 million. Because the picture is of an Israeli F-16 dipping its wings with the Jewish Star of David, the symbol of the Israeli Air Force, over the gates from Auschwitz, Arbeit macht frei. Wow. And that was the first time that Israel participated in joint exercises with NATO, certainly in Poland. So you would assume that that would be enough. And then he says, but today, which is December 10th or 11th, I can't remember, 2016, the United States of America is selling us, not giving to us, not donating to us, not lending us, but selling to us the first F-35 leaving the United States of America. Selling to us. The first F-35 to leave the United States, not to Britain, not to Canada, and not to historic allies elsewhere, but to Israel. And do you know why, says the guy flying the F-16? Because the plane that America gets back in a year from now will be a far superior plane than the plane that's sold to us and is landing right now. Wow. Wow. And what a beautiful story captured in just a couple of brief sentences that encapsulates 75 years of history. Now, if you look at history, world history, the world does not move this quickly. Now it feels like everything, every day is like 11 headlines and like news cycles are if you get nervous, just breathe. Close your eyes, have a 30-minute nap, and the world will be different. That's the world that we live in today. It really will be. Don't be anxious. You'll be fine. I almost promise you this. But in up until this last decade, which has gone insane, all of human history has never moved as rapidly as those 75 years of advancement. Never. Certainly not for a country, not for a people. And Ambassador Friedman and I had a privilege in February of 2018 to be flown down on an Israeli Air Force helicopter, that when you close the door of the Israeli Air Force helicopter, they have something called Tfilat Haderech on the door of the helicopter, which is traveler's prayer. So if you sit next to a Jewish guy sitting on a plane and you see them mumbling before they take off, they're not asking for another drink. That happens later. But they're reciting a prayer asking God for protection during this journey. And you have Israeli Air Force pilots who get into a helicopter with an Israeli Star of David on the side, and when they close the door, religious, not religious, Jewish, not Jewish, what sits next to them, like we have our bumper sticker, like baby on board, you have something that says Tfilat Haderech, a Jewish traveler's prayer. It's an incredible thing. We get into the helicopter, we fly to the Nevatim Air Force Base, and we are there on the first day that the first F-35 squadron outside of the United States of America is operational. And we're there with one of our 3-star generals from the U.S. Air Force, with the head of the Israeli Air Force, General Norkin, and I'm going to spare you most of the conversation because I'm sure much of it is classified. But the important part that we walked out with was General Clark, the 3-star general, turns to Ambassador Friedman and says, you know what's unbelievable? The Israelis have had this plane for 1 year. The plane that we are now training on back in the United States is a vastly superior plane than the plane that we sold them because of their technology. American lives are saved because of this technology. Our protection and power is projected further and better than it ever could have been beforehand because of Israeli technology. And the know-how and the knowledge that we have is vastly superior than anything that we could have done on our own. And now turn it not into a 75-year history, but a 76-year history, and that's insane. Just amongst the thing, and this is how the ambassador begins every one of his conversations. He says that he would not be standing here based upon simple math, because a improbability times an improbability times an improbability, you guys know how these things work when you square them, times another improbability equals a impossibility, unless somebody else is helping. And to be able to stand here and represent the United States of America on behalf of Ambassador Friedman is literally the highest privilege that I will ever have in my life. Last year when we opened up the embassy, I thought that was going to be it. I thought I peaked at 38 years old. It turns out my wife informed me that I peaked at 27 years old when I married her. So it was the wrong context, but she was right about that. That's a fair comment. But I outkicked the coverage on that one significantly. But it's tremendous meaning to be able to be here. So I always share that with people because in the context of a universe where you have the massacre in Pittsburgh and you have the shooting in Poway and you've got school shootings and you've got challenges that crop up, I know that Ambassador Friedman turned to me after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting and he said, Aryeh, what can we do? I'm sick of saying stuff. I want to do something. And he turned to me and said, come up with something. And we put our heads together. And we decided this past year, immediately after Passover, we led the first ever royal we, Ambassador Friedman and 9 other ambassadors led the first ever U.S. delegation on a program called March of the Living. And what March of the Living is you walk out of the gates that say Arbeit macht frei. You walk the 3+ kilometers to Birkenau, which is the death camp. that 1.5 million people walked down and never had the privilege of walking up, and they led 15,000 young people, mostly from the United States of America, many with Israeli flags, many more with American flags, walking down those train tracks that had America bombed in 1944. Many of those 1.5 million people would have been alive. But making a pledge, iron cast, with our ambassador to Germany, our ambassador to the Holy See, our ambassador to Spain, our ambassador to Portugal, our ambassador to Israel, our special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, our chairman to preserve heritage abroad. Members of the Trump administration on behalf of President Trump and the United States of America were sick of saying no to anti-Semitism, so they stood up and walked in order to try to stamp out anti-Semitism. And then they got on a plane and flew here to Israel and spent Shabbat in Jerusalem at the Western Wall in the Old City. And we woke up Sunday morning attacked by 700 rockets. And they marched to the Prime Minister's office and pulled him out of a security cabinet meeting and said, we have a statement that we want you to read. And every one of these ambassadors, it's not a new thing for Ambassador Friedman to wholly and totally condemn Hamas for their activities. I mean, Ambassador Nikki Haley did it beautifully. Would you rather condemn the kids sitting in kindergarten or the people shooting at the kindergartners? This should not be tough. It's not a difficult decision. But for our ambassadors representing the United States to countries in Europe who oftentimes sit on the sidelines, stood up and made a statement. How would you feel if these rockets were falling in Lisbon or in London or in Paris or in Berlin or in Brussels? How would you feel? And they made that statement strong, and that statement was heard in the capitals of which they went back to the next day. And to imagine continuing the journey that started in 1944 to these ambassadors knocking on the Prime Minister of Israel's door, saying, we want to give you this statement to demonstrate unequivocally your right to defend your citizens in any way that you need to in order to protect these lives. It's just, it's historic. It's historic. So that I think you need to know from a context perspective, because this is the tremendous, the Hebrew word is zechut, the merit that I have to be helping to the degree that I can the ambassadors. So the second thing that I want to share with you is the following thing. I don't know if you've ever been to a board meeting, certainly not a Jewish not-for-profit board meeting. They can get heated. Can you imagine after 2,000 years deciding what your flag is going to look like? Now, I don't know if you ever went to camp, but color war was a big deal for us. So, and we negotiated about what the banner was going to look like. How long did that banner stand there for? 3 seconds if we were lucky. It made it into like the camp yearbook, you know what I'm saying? But we cried if I didn't get my symbol on that thing. Can you imagine the passion after 2,000 years, what the flag is going to look like? It's a big deal, right? So how'd they come up with the flag? You ever think about this? This is our history. We can speak to the people who made the flag. How'd they come up with the flag? So we're lucky. There are not a lot of symbols in Judaism. So there really are not. So there are probably only 3 camps here. You have like the menorah, right? The candelabra. You got the lion, right? You got the Star of David. I don't have any others. Am I missing anything? No, I really don't. They didn't have the King David or the Dan back then, so they didn't have even the pictures of the hotels. I'm saying this is what you had. So the star people won, which is great. The star people won. What's with the stripes on the side of the flag? You'd think that the star was good enough. What's with the stripes? We can be participatory if you want. You ever seen the prayer shawl? What's that? The talit. Fantastic. Okay, I didn't know we were going full Hebrew. The talit. Excellent. So we've got talit. So you got the talit, except that's not true. Because which way do the stripes go on the talit? They go vertical. So you're telling me they made all of this effort, we're going to go like a talit, but we're going to throw them off? That'll confuse them when they attack. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they think they're going after like those guys over there. No, come on, it doesn't make any sense. So if it's the talit, why would it be horizontal and not vertical? So let me try to blow your minds here with an idea from Nachmanides, who was a medieval commentator on the Bible in the 1300s, 1200s Spain, 1200s. I'm fairly positive about that. He made a pilgrimage here on his own. He's actually buried in Sfat, pretty near the Galilee over there. He wanted to live the last of his life over here. So Nachmanides, the Ramban, decides that why blue? Why is it blue? It could have been red, it could have been purple, it could have been lots of different things. Why blue? So it says blue in the Bible in the end of Numbers discusses that the blueness that you're supposed to wear on the strings is supposed to symbolize the blueness of the sea. When you see the blueness on your string, the blueness on your talit, you're supposed to see the blueness of the sea. When you see the blueness of the sea, you're supposed to see the blueness of the sky. Now you see a little bit of the horizontal action, right? The blueness of the sea, blueness of the sky. So the blueness of the sky, you're supposed to be reminded that the throne of glory is also blue. When I'm reminded that the throne of glory is also blue, I'm reminded of what Hebrew National teaches us every time we have a hot dog, that we answer to a higher authority, correct? None of you have ever had a Hebrew National hot dog? Come on, people, let's go. So I've got the blueness of the sky, the sea, the blueness of the sky, and then I've got the blueness of the Kisei HaKavod, of the throne of glory, that we answer to a higher authority, except that also doesn't make any sense. Because if my goal is to see the blueness of the Talit and teach me that I'm supposed to be moral, that I'm supposed to have a greater purpose, right? So what do I need to make a pit stop at the ocean and a pit stop at the sky in order to realize that? Throne of glory is or it is not royal blue. That's the option. I mean, it's a binary choice. So what am I making the stops on the way? So I'm making the stops for the following reason, says the Ramban, says Nachmanides. He says that if you take a cup of water out of the ocean, what color is that cup of water? It's clear. When can you see the blueness of the ocean? Only when you can see the entirety of it, when you can see it all together. If you take a cup of air out of the sky, if you could do such a thing, what color is that cup of air? It's clear. When can you see the blueness of the sky? Only when you see the entirety of it together. If you want to understand what a higher authority is, if you want to understand a greater purpose, you have to remove the you from being the center of the universe. It's not all about you. It's about us. And I share this with everybody because I'm going to leave you with a challenge. The U.S.-Israel relationship is the best it's ever been with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, with Ambassador Friedman and Vice President Pence and John Bolton and the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt. And I remember when the ambassador called me 2 years ago, Passover, he goes, Aryeh, you're out of the top 10. I said, I'm out of the top 10 of what? When Bolton came on board and Pompeo, he goes, you're not even the most pro-Israel guy, like, forget in Israel. I'm saying the administration. I've been doing this my entire life. I'm not even on the AAA, I'm AA. So I'm saying, like, it's a really esteemed group of people over here, which is fantastic. But that cannot be what our relationship is about. It can't be. Because you know what's going to happen? We're done in 2 years, or we're done in 6 years. Or we're done in 10 years, or we're done in 14 years. And it's something awesome about America. I know we get worked up about this, but we have elections. And the day after the elections, we cry a lot. Well, some people cry a lot. But it's a democracy. We move on. The U.S.-Israel relationship cannot be dependent on that. The U.S.-Israel relationship needs to be, and do I have a couple more minutes? Yes? Okay. Never let the person introduce you who's heard some of your stuff before. So, Josh, thank you for those nice words. Let me just tell you what sits in the first ever ambassador's office in Jerusalem. Josh told you, I'm going to be quick with the spy thing, because Josh told you about this enormous painting that sits in front of the periphery vision of the ambassador. So he actually has a different twist than what Josh said, in addition to what Josh said. So let me just give you that for 1 second. What was the sin of the 10 spies? Correct. Did they tell the truth? They told the truth. They didn't have vision. They didn't have conviction. They didn't have faith. So the ambassador said there's no difference between me and anybody else who's ever sat in this seat, except that's not true. There's never been a U.S. ambassador who's ever sat in that seat in Jerusalem, and that is awesome. Right? So, but anybody else who sits in that seat has the same access to information that he would have. Said he committed sins before he sat in that seat, he'll commit sins after he sits in that seat. But the sin he cannot commit right now is lack of vision, lack of faith, and lack of conviction. You cannot have that. So you've got that picture which sits there. Then we've got something else, which is called, I don't know, I'm looking now at the younger people in the room over here. Do you ever call your friends? No, not what do you call them. Do you ever pick up the phone and call your friends?
Oh, like a phone?
Yes. No, you don't. You text them, you WhatsApp them. Only in worst case scenario do you pick it up and actually speak to them, correct? Correct? I'm right. You can just nod along. If not, somebody else nod along. I think I'm right about this, right? My kids, you're like, you're so old-fashioned, you're speaking to people. I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. That's embarrassing for you. So we also have the same relationship with the government of Israel. We get along so swimmingly that we'll have conversations that will be, quick conversations with notes passed across the table, with quick emails shot to each other, with text messages that for the camera we save to our government address so they are accessible via Freedom of Information Act. So that they're there. But we do some things via text message. We save them for records because that's our job. But there's supposed to be a formal way that you communicate. So let's assume that the pastor and I were best friends, which we're quickly becoming, and he wanted to sell me his house. So we would shake hands, and he's like, you're an honorable guy, and I know he's an honorable guy, but let's do a contract anyways. Yeah. Why? Because the bank doesn't know that we're honorable guys, and the title company doesn't know that we're honorable guys, and there's a good thing by doing a contract. It makes sense. So governments also do the same thing. They're called diplomatic notes. They're called diplomatic notes. That's how we put in a contract for any agreement the United States and Israel have. Any other country in the world has this. Most diplomatic notes get filed so late and so far behind that you're writing a diplomatic note that is no longer relevant. You still have to do it anyways legally, but I'm sure there's a summer intern in the basement who writes these diplomatic notes. The average response of a diplomatic note in the U.S.-Israel relationship, I think, takes somewhere between 20 and 28 months to send one and to get a return. It takes a little while. It's not critical. It's papering the document, but okay, it's not critical. If it is critical, I'm sure we do it much faster than that. So hanging in the side of the ambassador's office, the other side, is a diplomatic note sent out February 27th at 5:30 p.m. that I hand-delivered to the courier. And what does the diplomatic note say? It says, Dear Mr. Prime Minister, we're asking for permission to open up an embassy in Jerusalem, what President Trump has pronounced as the capital of Israel. February 28th at 8 a.m. as I pulled my car into the lot, the courier was waiting with the response of the diplomatic note, which basically in emoji language would have been 2 thumbs up. Because they can't talk in emoji, they wrote yes in a very long-winded way. But in the history of diplomatic notes in this century, there's never been a give and take as fast as that on anything ever. On anything ever. Which speaks about the presence of the relationship that we have. There is no daylight. Doesn't mean we don't disagree. We disagree on a lot of things, but we disagree out of love. I've got a brother. We disagree on a lot of things, but he's my brother. Right? That's the present. What's the future? This is the third thing that hangs in the ambassador's office. It's just important for you to know, because he picked out all 3 of these things because they're historic, because it's the first ever U.S. ambassador's office in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. And the third thing is a picture of astronauts, or their uniforms before they suited up. And there are 4 American flags on the orange, the bright orange jumper that we all recognize, an Israeli flag, and then another American flag. And these were the uniforms of the astronauts that were about to board. It was the Columbia or the Challenger? It was the Columbia that exploded on re-entry? Yeah. Which speaks to the future. Obviously, that ended so incredibly tragically. But space, exploration, the future is absolutely and totally critical and exciting and adventurous and beyond the bounds of what we can think about, which keeps us dreaming in a meaningful way. But why that picture? Why that picture? So Ilan Ramon, who was the Israeli astronaut who tragically lost his life along with the other American heroes upon re-entry, did not become famous for being the first Israeli astronaut. Became famous for something else that is not nearly as well known as it should be. In 1981, when Israel chose to blow up the Iraqi nuclear reactor, they chose to do it because Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister at the time, said we have to blow it up in a very short period of time because once it goes live, I will not risk 500,000 Iraqi lives to save 3 million Jewish lives. Wow. Says, I will not do that. Right. So there's a very narrow window to be able to do this. And the planes, this long story, how they got our planes. It was the first major Air Force plane sale that we had given. They were actually destined to the Shah in Iran in 79. Because of the overthrow, those planes got sold to Israel, which is ironic, being the only planes that can destroy the Iraqi nuclear reactor. I mean, the way God works in this particular case is beyond puzzling. But there was a limited amount of pilots who were trained on that plane. And Israel has something that the United States, I believe, proudly has as well. We don't send people on suicide missions. Right. Every human life is valuable. Right. Always. Except for this one circumstance. Menachem Begin decided that the plan that the generals had presented to him had a 0 to 1% chance of bringing back all 6 pilots. The first 3 or 4 had a chance. Number 5, highly unlikely. And number 6, there was no mathematical way that pilot number 6 was going to return. So their mission was that if you don't see it exploded, fly your plane into the reactor. Take it out. This is the one chance that Israel has to take nuclear weapons out of the hands of a maniacal murderer. And that's her job. I believe it's the first and only time that Israel has even posited the premise of a suicide mission, because it doesn't believe in that. And there was a pilot who volunteered because the Israeli military would not assign somebody that job. And the pilot who volunteered was Ilan Ramon, who went on to be the astronaut. Why did he volunteer? Because out of the 11 pilots that were trained to fly the plane at that point in time, there was only one who was single. So he thought that it was incumbent upon him to take the greatest risk. And if you read in the books about Begin, as he sat on a Saturday afternoon waiting for news of this military action, he gets a call saying all 6 planes are returning, it was successful. He did not believe them. He did not believe them. He insisted on being driven on the Sabbath to the airport to count the planes because he had already written the eulogy letter to the pilot's parents because he knew that this was going to happen. So that hangs on the ambassador's wall for the following reason, and I think I'll conclude with this. Shared past and common values, which is the picture of the spies. Never to forget that we have conviction, we have vision, we have faith. We always have to have that. The close relationship that we have today, as symbolized by the 2 diplomatic notes given within 12 hours of each other. And had I not gone home to have dinner or speak to a group like you guys, it probably would have been 2 hours instead of 12 hours. And then you've got the picture of the space and the future. And that's where it's your responsibility. We spoke briefly about how this relationship has never been better, and it has never been better. Thank God for that. It's good for America. This is not just good for Israel. It is very good for America. That relationship can only be secured with you guys. And I'm going to give you 3 things to do as homework. Number 1 is you've been praying, pray harder. And pray more. You can, I know you can. Number 2 is before you get on a plane to go back home, you decide how you are going to support this endeavor further. That means that you plan your next trip here with somebody who has not been here. You plan your next trip here with somebody who does not look at this country the same way you do. You plan your next trip here with somebody who does not look at America the same way that you do, and you spend time here opening their eyes. If this matters to you, you can't go home and complain. You have to pick a time and you have to come back and you have to do something about it, because it doesn't matter what we do. The security for the future of this relationship is fully in your hands. And then you go home and you have to make America stronger. Because if America has these challenges that we're reading about, I'm blessed to be over here, so I'm not fully in it. I fully ascribe to the take a nap and everything will be better in 30 minutes theory. If everybody in America did that, I think we'd all be happier. But America, man, needs a lot more listening and a lot less yelling. And we can do that when we get home. So that is what I tried to share with the group. And then I have, Pastor, would you come up here for 1 second? I have something for you. It's small, but it's important. Stand to the side. I'll show you in a second. Okay. No, right here. Perfect. Fantastic. Sorry. You're great. That, do you know on December 5th, 2017, if I met your group, I cannot welcome your group to Jerusalem, Israel, as an American diplomat? Before President Trump on December 6, 2017, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, it was American policy that Jerusalem was not part of Israel. Wow. Which means that you can be at the Western Wall, or you can be at this lovely hotel, or another lovely hotel, or the Schnitzel place up the block, which is fantastic, and you could be in Jerusalem, but you cannot be in Jerusalem, Israel. That is not possible, according to American policy prior to December 6, 2017. And then President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he said, in order to make this not just a speech but action, I'm going to open up an embassy soon. And he worked with Ambassador Friedman to do it immediately. So on December 6th, on 2017, the President Trump said, it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This sacred city shall call forth the best of humanity. Then on this side is a picture of the Tel Aviv street sign heading up towards Jerusalem and all the skyline of Jerusalem with a sign of Jerusalem there, and it says promises made. Wow. So promises made are fantastic. We live in a region where people make promises all the time. There's very little expectation that anybody keeps that promise. On May 14th, 2018, we were sitting fairly close to each other at an event that I had the privilege to help run. Prime Minister Netanyahu got up and in famous words that should live on in all of American and Israeli history said, President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history. America and Israel are forever united, as Jared Kushner said so profoundly. The United States Embassy officially opened in Jerusalem, Israel, which is something we could not have said prior to December 6th of 2017 and May 14th of 2018. And at the bottom has the important part, and this is what I'm giving to the pastor and give on to you guys. Promises kept. Yes. Wow. Whatever you feel here and the promises that you make, if you don't keep them, it doesn't matter. So, sir, for bringing this group and for committing to bring back many, many more, on behalf of Ambassador Friedman, we want to give you our coin. Promises made, promises kept.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Amen.
It's just so fun to spend time with you.
Amen. How about another 15 minutes, maybe questions? And by the way, forgive me for taking text there, but that was Sam Grunberg in Washington, and he said to tell you hi.
Ah.
He'll be back.
He wants that coin. Don't give him that coin. That's all I'm saying. That's what he's going to be scrambling for. I know what Josh was going to say.
That is amazing.
Well, thank you.
And we did sit near each other at the opening of the embassy, and it's something that we were saying at dinner is we can't stop now.
Right.
We can't say, oh, look what's happened. When we were at Shabbat the other day with Josh and Rebecca, he said, we've seen more things happen this year than we thought would happen before the Messiah came. But as you said today, we can't stop now. Yeah. Let me ask the first question. What do we do?
What do we do? I gave you 3 things so far, but we're going to do better than that. I'm going to ask you guys to go home. And you know, in June of, I wonder whether I'm allowed to ask this. In June of 2017, the Senate passed from 91 to nothing that the embassy should be moved to Jerusalem when the president signed his second waiver not moving the embassy to Jerusalem. I know this doesn't actually do anything. On December 6th, 2017, when the president recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the Senate, in some form of form, decided that was now a 51 to 49 decision. It is, this I can say very proudly and clearly, it is not a good thing for this to be a partisan issue. I don't care where you live. I don't care who, I'll tell you the following thing actually, this will be relevant to what you can do. People like to take pictures at our plaque. It's a pretty cool thing. People come to the plaque and they get to see the plaque on the embassy, and it's a big deal. And it's fun to see the tourist buses come by, and some people pray, and some people have like this dance, and there's a group that brings a special bottle of wine that was minted just to drink at the embassy opening. That's a fun place to be. And I bring various different groups by. It's under construction. If not, we would be there now. You can take a picture by the outside, but the inside is under construction right now, so I can't bring anybody in. And one of the ladies turned to me and said, I won't take a picture by the plaque. He's not my president. Which again, I don't judge. But when I brought everybody into the group, I said, there's something awesome about working at a U.S. embassy. I get to do diplomacy, which is fine. But every U.S. embassy and consulate has our people who work on what's called American Citizen Services. And we have Americans who call us who are in trouble all around the world all the time. And when they call the hotline, they normally get the Marines. I can promise you the first question that the Marine asks is not, who did you vote for? It does not ask, did you vote? They do not ask, did you pay your taxes? It does not ask if it was your fault. It just says, are you an American? If we can help you, we will. And that is unbelievable. And I would just encourage you when you go back, whether they're state representatives or local representatives or federal representatives, ask people to stand for what they've stood for. Was that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. This should not be a bipartisan issue. It cannot be a bipartisan issue. Jerusalem either is or it is not the capital of Israel. And in June of 2017, 91 to nothing in a Senate that doesn't do 91 to nothing with anything. So I would encourage you, reach out. Don't yell. Don't scream. But be polite and let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care. Tell them that you just came from Jerusalem. And it pretty much looks like the capital from your perspective. And that you, as working for you, whether you voted for them or not, that you expect them to hold those standards. There are standards that we expect of our elected officials, and there's no reason why they shouldn't hold of those standards. And let's try as hard as we can to not make Israel an issue that divides us. It should be an issue that unites us. It's a source of tremendous blessing for all of us. And when you bring back people, because this is the second piece, I understand why people are not excited about some of the political stuff here. I get it. I really do. I'm intellectually honest enough to realize that even though I think I'm right, other people think I'm wrong about this. But there's another side of Israel that there's a part of Israel that everybody can grab onto. Everybody can grab onto. You want to talk about humanity? You can talk about the hospital that opened up in the north of Israel to allow in Syrian refugees who were wounded, snuck them over the border, treated them, and snuck them back over the border, and they had the doctors only speak Arabic, so God forbid that the Syrians who were saved by the Israeli doctors would think that they would be tainted for life because they were treated by Israeli doctors. Who does that not move? When you want to talk about in Nepal and in Haiti, the first boats there before our boats got there to help people. Nepal and Haiti have never voted in favor of Israel in the UN once. Do you know what the most common name in Haiti was after the hurricane? Israel. Because the first people on the ground were Israel. They got there in 32 hours, we got there in 36 hours. Can you imagine? There's something for everybody in this country. If it doesn't connect with you here, that's fine. We know that it doesn't connect with everybody here. But this cannot be a partisan issue. This needs to be an issue of values. Shared values in the past, current relationship today, and a shared future that we've got. We need to be able to articulate it. They're into high tech. You're looking at whatever medicine you've got for whatever blood pressure or, God forbid, Parkinson's or anything else like that is coming out of here. Yeah. It's coming out of here. Yeah. This is the place. You want to talk about lives that are saved? The intel that we get from Israel, and I can't go into any more detail, the people who vote against Israel all the time in the UN, who stand up and condemn them, Israel is saving lives of their country people and has never once made it conditional based upon support in the United Nations. Wow. Because saving a life is saving a life. So when you go back, bring those arguments back. And don't use them as arguments. It would be super great to use them as conversations and statements, not as a pushover, but we can be very much right and we don't need to yell. And I think we can win a lot in that regard. So that's sort of hopefully thing number one that we can do.
Something that Aryeh said to us as we were getting ready to come in here is, let everybody know. Open your mouth up. Say what's right. Speak who's doing what's right, and speak and say, these people aren't doing right. President Trump and the administration that we have right now, those who are simply anti-Israel, anti-God, anti-morals, anti-life, they are being very vocal. We must be more vocal than them. Yeah. Don't let anybody pressure you. Aryeh brought up the universities, the young people, and the pressure that they're putting out there. We've got to be vocal. Yeah. And we are. On our television program, we say we were already planning next month's television program. The whole next month or the next 2 months are dealing with anti-Semitism that is growing around the world. Say, well, what if people don't like it? We can't care what people like or don't like. We have to stand for the truth. Can I ask you one more question to address? Is anti-Semitism alive in the world today?
Very short answer is yes, unfortunately. But the part that I think was necessary, why the ambassadors who left March of the Living, they left the walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau and got on a plane. They sat in economy for the first time in many, many years for most of those guys to get here on an overnight flight. And you'd be surprised at what the reaction was. Like, this is where I sit, guys. This is so we landed in Israel. They didn't know that there were going to be rockets. They didn't know that there was going to be a statement to be made. They came here. Why did they come here? Because Secretary Pompeo said something exceptionally clear at the AIPAC conference, which is where we started to lose on the college campus. And when we didn't quash this on the college campus, it suddenly became polite conversation, which is somehow you can be anti-Zionist, but not considered anti-Semitic.
Big point.
And those two we wanted to link intrinsically. The slippery slope of condemning Israel for something that you would not condemn any other country for, so call a spade a spade. You can disagree with Israel lots of different things. You can. So it's not a perfect country. We're not a perfect country. I can promise you we're all working to get better. We're all working to get better. But if you specifically single out the one Jewish state for an issue that you haven't singled out any other state for, that's anti-Semitism. And it should be treated like anti-Semitism. You can walk into a cocktail party on the, I like to say the Upper East Side, and then I get in trouble, and on the Upper East Side, and you can say that all Jews should be hanged, and you're going to be kicked out of there, as you should be, as any civil place would kick you out. But you can say, I'm not positive that there's the right of the Jewish state to exist. You'll be invited down, you'll be given a cigar, although probably one of those smoke-free ones, and like a fancy glass of champagne, and to be invited to opine on your expert opinion that makes you incredibly cultured and intelligent, because we haven't thought about the elimination of 6 million people in 7 years. Maybe let's think about it again. So it's an insane premise. Who questions any other country's right to exist? Especially a country that goes out of its way, always, to make other people's lives better. It's not perfect. I'll be the first people to tell you, go watch a Knesset hearing. You know what Vice President Pence did? Credit to Vice President Pence. I mean, what a leader. He came and spoke in the Knesset. If you haven't heard his speech that he gave in the Knesset, go home and listen to this speech. It will inspire you to great. Don't listen to it before you go to sleep. It's going to get your heart racing completely and totally ruined that night. Listen to it in the morning when it's tough to get out of bed. It's going to get you going. It's a great speech. And to my own chagrin, I told him, look, you're going to get booed when you get up in the Knesset. Because there are people in the Israeli Knesset who are not in favor of this administration's policies. It's a democracy here. I said, please don't do that. I said, it's going to be embarrassing for the United States of America. I don't think it's the right decision. I said, I've been invited to speak at the Knesset. I'm going to speak at the Knesset. And he gets up and he gets booed. And about 11 people start protesting him. They're escorted out fairly quickly. And Vice President Pence says, that's what you call democracy. Can you imagine that? The humility for the United States of America to show up to a country that to a great degree without our assistance would not be anywhere near where it is today. He gets booed in that Knesset and compliments the character there. Somebody else, there's no right of a Jewish state to exist. It's because of stuff like that anybody who makes that comment is so blatantly anti-Semitic should be excused from polite company and fined to the extent of the law that we can. But because that's been pervasive on the college campus for the last decades, and now it's become part of our groupthink. So we didn't squash it when we could have. It's become part of the groupthink, and that becomes terrible. We cannot be complacent. The pastor said as eloquently as possible, there are other people who are screaming. I beg you don't scream. But I beg you to speak forcefully and do it very, very clearly. And I'm really just focused on you guys because you guys are the people that matter. You really are, because the rest of us haven't done a good enough job. But we're going to try harder, and you guys are going to do better because that's your job. No pressure. Man, I should be doing something else other than hanging out with this guy. So it's okay. It's okay. Anyways, an honor to see you guys. As I told you guys, you're coming back, so I can't wait to see you guys with more fresh faces when you guys come back. It'll be great. That's what